The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM Software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users on demand on iTunes and on YouTube, and on my blog, GaryBaumgarten.com, where you're encouraged to post your comments, whether you agree with yours truly or not, no retribution, and where you should also be subscribing to my Twitter feed, Twitter.com/GaryBaumgarten, to find out what's really going on in the world. Whether you get to see this or not in your mainstream media, sometimes you can, but oftentimes you can't. And thanks to our great friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we're syndicated to an additional 12 million households. I am your host, Gary Baumgarten. I welcome you to the show. We're going to talk about Afghanistan in a minute. Our guest is ready, but before we get to that, Boaz, yesterday we were talking about the president's address to the nation's students this coming Tuesday, and how all these people are concerned about it because they are fearful that he's going to try to indoctrinate them. Do you know who the first president was to address students in classrooms across this country?
I'm not going to say that it was George Bush. I'm sure it was somebody before him.
Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan did it, and when he did it, using C-SPAN to get his message across, no internet, of course, then, because Al Gore had not yet invented it, he actually pushed his tax-cutting agenda. So he used it to poison the minds of the children in favor of tax cuts. The second one to do it was George Bush, but not George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush. Well, for those of you who are concerned, the White House will be releasing the speech on Monday, so parents can check it out and determine whether or not it's nefarious or benign, and whether or not it's okay to send your kiddies to school. A NATO airstrike in Afghanistan has killed 90 people, many of them, we are told, Taliban members, but some 40, the Afghan government says, were civilians. This comes after U.S. military officials said that they were tweaking their operations to minimize civilian casualties. Well, guys, this attack will do very little to cement a cooperative relationship with the civilian population there. Now, in the meantime, the U.S. commander in Afghanistan is expected to ask for more troops as the fight with the Taliban has of late been failing. Joining me today to discuss these latest developments is Brian Katulis, Katulis, Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress, where his work focuses on U.S. national security policy. Katulis.
Okay, Gary, we lost your audio.
Just returned from Afghanistan.
And you're back. Sorry.
Has served as a consultant. Okay, thank you. Numerous U.S. government agencies, private corporations, and non-governmental organizations on projects in 24 countries. He is co-author of the Prosperity Agenda, What the World Wants from America and What We Need in Return. It's a book on U.S. national security. He's worked at the State and Defense Departments as well as for the National Security Council. So I welcome Brian Katulis. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? To News Talk Online at Paltalk.com.
Yes, sir. Yes, you are. Thank you for having me on the program.
Well, then we're on our way to an excellent segment, since I pronounced your name properly. Otherwise, you'd be pissed off at me, and we wouldn't get a good interview out of you. So what are we doing in Afghanistan? Supposedly, we were there to catch Osama bin Laden and his cronies, and the last I heard, we were there to ensure that the election occurred without too much violence, and to eradicate the poppy fields, or to get the farmers to switch from poppy production to wheat. I don't see that we're going after Mr. bin Laden.
Well, I was in Afghanistan for 2 weeks last month, and I was there for the elections. I was actually in Kabul and got out outside of Kabul for a little bit, and I have to say it was one of the more unique elections I've seen in my life, and I think it's hard to hold an election at a time of war. But I left the country, and I may go back to try to learn some more, but I left puzzled as to what the clear objective is from the Obama administration at this point, because it seems like, as you mentioned in the lead-in, our initial action there, our military action, was to go after the regime, the Taliban regime that had actually harbored al-Qaeda, and al-Qaeda had used the ground as a training ground. But now I think we've had a distraction of an unnecessary war in Iraq, and I think we're slowly moving towards mission creep that I think could be easily addressed if the Obama administration focuses on it. But I come away from the trip deeply worried about what our core objectives are and whether we have a realistic goal in mind.
Well, mission creep, that means changing the mission, and that's exactly what George W. Bush did in Iraq, which caused him all kinds of problems. And this is a president who prides himself on studying previous administrations. The president he perhaps most studied was Abraham Lincoln, but maybe he needs to take a better look at his immediate predecessor to avoid the same pitfalls, because if we keep getting people coming back, our brave men and women, in body bags for a mission that keeps changing, and they are not clear on why they are there, doesn't this threaten to become President Obama's Iraq?
It has potential to do that, and I don't think we're there just yet. And in large part, I think there's an opportunity in the next few weeks with General McChrystal just recently offering his report, and with the Obama administration, I think, open at this point to all sorts of views. I don't think there's any pre-cooked solution here or idea of what the next step might be. And I think that's the difference between this administration and the previous one. I have a certain degree of confidence, and part of it, some of my friends are working over there, so I'm a little bit biased. But I don't think, they're looking at the world and the challenge in Afghanistan simplistically. I think they're really trying to take a serious look about whether or not, more of an effort is really worth it. One of the voices that has been skeptical of more troops and just more resources is Vice President Joe Biden, and he's been pretty vocal about it, at least in the Washington policy circles. I don't know that he's given a grand speech about it, and he's offering his counsel to others. And I think they're at the point where they really, really need to make some sort of decision about what it is we're trying to achieve. Let me give you an example. I had an event I organized here in Washington with Ambassador Richard